So welcome everybody. So this is the practice of Tonglen, but I like to call it the transformational meditation, because it's probably, out of all the practices that I've done over the years of teaching, this is the one that is always my go-to when I need to transform how I'm feeling rather than putting it on other people. Okay, so Tonglen it's powerful. We start with ourselves first, and then we start to bring our awareness outwards towards other people. And we transform ourselves essentially, because you can't change other people. And that's what this is, a form of transformation. So let's just start with a nice straight spine. And if you're sitting on the floor and then get uncomfortable, because this is an hour, then feel free to change body position at any time. So let's just start with a breath in and a sigh out. And again. Lovely. And once more. Okay, now let's just take a gentle twist to one side. Just wringing out the spinal area. Lovely. And change sides. Good, back to centre, and a little bit of sort of cat-cow movement for the spine. Inhale as you come forwards, just let the elbows bend. Exhale, draw the belly in, chin to chest. And just feel yourself starting to really connect to the breath here. Eyes closed. Tracing any resistance in the body. And just using the exhale to release it. Lovely, spine nice and straight. Let's just turn the head one way, relax the jaw, and then the other. Just easing out. Lovely, and then just let the head settle. I want to simply observe the natural breath. So just letting the hands rest in meditation mudra of your choice. And just noticing the basics. Does the body feel comfortable? Is it upright? Is the jaw relaxed? Are the shoulders away from the ears? And just become very familiar with the natural breath. So be aware of its texture as it comes in through the nostrils. And as it comes back out. Be aware of the different temperature of the inhalation to the exhalation. And just to start with, I want us to do a body scan. So as you're concentrating on the breath, really notice how your body's feeling. So there may be some physical discomfort, but I also want you to notice any emotional, mental discomfort. And remember that everything we can sense is simply vibrational frequency on different levels. Just noticing maybe there's some emotion that's really on the surface at the moment. Maybe there's some thoughts from some previous conversations. Just be aware of them in the body field. And just direct the breath's energy, the pranic energy, to them. So we're just going to give them a little bit of a clear. So breathing in, attention on the areas that you've found. And a nice long exhalation. Imagine that exhalation dissipating and dissolving the energy. Lovely. Now we're just going to work with Sukha Pranayama, which just means easy breath. So if you know how to count the breath, use the right hand. We're just going to do one round of each count. If you're not familiar with the counting mechanism, then I'll be counting for you. So bring your attention to the tip of the nose and breathe in for a count of 4. And breathe out for 4. And again. And just keep going. Notice how open the nostrils are as we inhale. The breath is really quite dynamic. And then as we exhale, there's a natural closing slightly as the breath comes out. Feels very different. So you've got that continual flow of energy. Inhale and exhale interconnected. Good, now we're going to move the count to 5. Be aware of a very subtle slowing of the breath as we increase the count. Notice any distracting thoughts, simply bring the mind back to the count and the breath, just observing the distraction. I'm going to move the count to 6 now. So for those of you who haven't maybe done a lot of pranayama, when we start to increase the counts, we're not really breathing in for more, we're just breathing in more slowly. And that's what affects positively the mind. So slow the breath down, breathe in for 6. Breathe out for 6. And you'll start to notice as we move to the higher counts that there is a natural pause in the breath, both at the top of the inhalation, where it's kind of just teetering there, deciding whether it wants to release itself out, and then you get that lovely exhalation. And then there's a moment when there's a pause and the breath's just resting there before it needs to come back in again. And it's these pauses where we're able to really connect to our true nature. In the pauses, the mind becomes still. And when the mind is still, we are free of our ego clinging. It's almost like the pauses are just a place of tenderness where we're held by the divine, whatever you want to label thatness. Good, let's increase the count to 7. And again, we're slowing it down even more. And a tip is concentrate right at the tip of the nose. Imagine the nose is a tap. And rather than having it on fully open and we're breathing in very quickly, we're closing it down. So it's just a very slow stream of energy. So breathe in for 7. Notice that the sound is much more subtle now as we reach the higher counts. Observe the natural pause, and then exhale. Natural pause. Just allow yourself to surrender and breathe in again. Start to really observe the exhalation and allow yourself to fully surrender into it. So we're using that driving energy of the original inhale of the prana, the dynamic sun energy. to gather up. And then we're allowing that exhalation to surrender and release. Lovely. Now we're going to go one step further into 8. So slow it right down. Now just keep going with the count, observing the natural pauses. And now start to visualize the inhale as an expansive quality. So you're expanding your awareness beyond the body as you inhale. As if you're creating this huge, vibrant ball of energy that you're sitting in. Just feeling that two-way energy. So imagine now that you're sitting in this vast golden ball of energy. And the inhale is coming from that field, but almost it's coming from just beyond it. So from consciousness itself. And it comes in towards the heart space, into the individual self. And then as you exhale, the individual self expands back out. So we're just using the breath to bring a sense of our energy field into the practice. And as you work with this simple breath count, I'm just going to read a couple of verses that I'd chosen to connect us into the Tonglen practice, and then we'll move towards it. So just keep really repeating the breath and that sense of expanding beyond our individual self, and then coming back into the individual self, because there is no separateness. So when we practice Tonglen, we start to realize that we are all interconnected. And when we do that, when we recognize that everybody that walks the planet has an individual consciousness, and that individual consciousness is part of the greater consciousness, we start to release our judgments, release our attachments and our fears, and we start to recognize ourselves in everybody. And then we feel more peaceful, which has a vibrational effect on those around you. And that just continues to expand around the globe. So we can affect huge change as individuals. So from knowing that God, so I use God in brackets, so for me it's not a word that I would use. I would use universal consciousness. So from knowing that consciousness completely fills everything, one is the same towards enemy and friend, in honour and dishonour. With this attitude, one attains joy. So I'm going to read the same verse from a much more traditional book. One who makes no distinction between friend and foe, honour and dishonour, knowing Brahman, so that's another word for consciousness or God, to be full in itself, all pervading, becomes supremely happy. And then the final one, which is really modern and very poetic. It's always the same. Barbarians and blockheads, rival queens and kings. The drama rolls on and on. When people honour you, you are supposed to feel honoured. When you don't get respect, they expect you to sulk in indignation. 1 minute you are cruising on a throne in the sky, the next you are standing on some bleak patch of dirt. I say the sun regards all with a steady eye. The force sustaining earth and sky calls everyone to awaken from this trance. This whole world revolves around an axis, and I am that. When you are friends with the friends to all beings, nothing is the same. Rich beyond measure, abundant beyond counting, you can move through this life laughing. Opinions of others have no rulership over you. So start to bring your attention to the center of the chest. And I want you to imagine that there is a circular window in the center of your chest. And inside it is this really bright light. And then start to imagine that your body, which is just the vehicle for the experience on planet Earth, imagine that your body is rather like a lighthouse, and that your inner self, which is your true self, driving around in the earth suit, is the light of awareness. And this light, it guides us back to our true nature, away from the overload of the senses and the information that comes in to the body and the brain, to our true nature. But it also shines out for others. So it's this connection to everything else that exists. We're just part of that. So keep breathing towards the center of the chest. And this light, you can imagine that it's like a diamond, so it's indestructible. It cannot be touched. And this light within us has always existed, and it will never cease to exist. And this light experiences many, many lifetimes. And know this light to be indestructible. And know this light to be your true self. Notice that there is a sense of an observing presence from this light radiating. It's observing the physical body that it's within as the vehicle for experience. It's observing the sound of my voice. It's observing the sensations of the body, the sensations of emotions and thoughts. And start to feel that sense of detachment from the physical vehicle as you become much more aware of this light in the heart space. And that you are this light. So for the purpose of Tonglen, for the visualization, we add in colour. So we take on suffering and we exhale light. But I always actually like to say we don't really take it on, we use it to transmute. So remember, nothing can touch the heart space. So as you inhale, I want you to imagine the inhalation is a kind of like a smoky grey colour, and it's coming towards that light. But as soon as it hits it, there's like this field around it, and it just transforms it into this iridescent particles that expand the heart space. And so as you breathe out, you're able to extend beyond yourself towards others. So you're sending that light out. So breathing in the smoky coloured light, and watch it be instantly transformed. And the exhale is a brilliant iridescent light, a golden white colour. So just going to add in a tiny thought to the mix. So I want you to think a smile without actually smiling as you breathe in. And as you breathe out. And notice the subtle change when we think a thought. And when we think a smile. How the body softens and the heart space opens more fully, becomes more brilliant. So we're going to start the practice now, but we're going to practice for ourselves first, because we can't give from an empty cup. So I want you to scan your body really fully, so physically, emotionally and mentally, for any suffering, discomfort, challenges. And all of them are simply vibrational frequencies. Some will be denser than others. So if you're feeling pain, then that's a more dense energy than perhaps an emotional sensation or even a mental sensation. So just notice it in all its glory and colour, the inner landscape. And we're going to gather that in. So as you inhale, imagine that that inhalation is pulling all of this that you've discovered in yourself towards the heart space, and it's like a grey cloud. And we're just going to pull it into the heart space. We're going to see it start to transform. And as we exhale, we're going to push out this golden white light into ourselves. And I want you to push that out beyond the physical body. So our energetic field comes out quite far, that big ball of energy that we've created right at the beginning of the practice. Push it out so it fills you completely with this beautiful light. So breathing in, drawing in anything that is challenging you, causing discomfort, suffering, just pull it in. And we don't necessarily need to label it, we can just feel it. It's energy. And then fill it with light. Be aware that with each breath, the heart space is getting bigger and bigger, expanding out beyond the physical form, the physical vehicle. Notice if there's any resistance to this within yourself. Take your attention to where you find the resistance. Give it more light. So we know that energy follows thought. So we're using the physical vehicle to direct prana, to help clear and transmute energy that's become stagnant within us. Taking full responsibility for our feelings, our reactions, our triggers, observing them. clearing the patterns. Good, I want you to really focus fully now for the next 3 breaths. Pulling in the grey light of suffering from your own field and pushing out the healing light of the heart space. So remember that self, the awareness that the heart space is part of consciousness. So we're just transmuting energy. Lovely. Now I want you to bring your attention to a loved one. So you might find that you instantly know who you want to work with now. So a loved one, I want you to choose a loved one that's easy to be with. So that could be a friend, it could be somebody you're in a familiar relationship with, it could be a work colleague. Just somebody who comes to mind. You may find that it's more than one person. So if that's the case, then just bring each person into the heart space so that you get a clear indicator of who needs to be worked with tonight. Because the heart space is where the truth lies, whereas if we try and decide it in our head, that's ego-based. So bring it into the heart and get a real sense of who you want to work with. And then start to visualize them clearly in the mind's eye. Notice maybe what they're wearing, where they're sitting, or maybe they're laying down. And then start to imagine yourself sitting right next to them. Maybe you hold their hand, and you can see how their suffering shows on their body. So it may be a clear physical suffering, and behind that there's always emotional, mental suffering as well, because it's all interconnected. So maybe also look at their face, particularly their eyes, and look into their eyes and be aware of any sadness there. Just be aware of what you see within them. And then also be aware of the sense of the energy of that suffering. And then start to visualize it pouring out of them. And as it pours out, it's forming a cloud of smoke that sits between you and them. So remember that this suffering is like fuel for the fire. I like to see it like a lump of coal put onto a roaring fire. We're going to transform it, and we are indestructible, our true self. So when you're ready, I want you to breathe that into the heart space. Imagine it being pulled directly in. Notice how the heart space is expanding, the light is becoming more brilliant. And as you exhale, you send out light to the person you're working with. The light of love, of kindness, joy, compassion. Inhaling the suffering in all its forms and how it shows itself. And exhale the light. Notice how the heart space is expanding quite rapidly with this loved one. If you start to feel quite emotional, if somebody you're working with is really quite poorly, then acknowledge your own emotion there and bring it into the light. Let it be transformed into the light of love, joy, compassion. And as you still focus on this person's face, notice that there's a subtle change going on now as you release their heavy load and you use your mental focus to transform that energy. Maybe there's more of a lightness to their body. Maybe their facial expression has changed. Good. Now I want you to focus, really concentrate all your effort on the next 3 rounds of breath, breathing in any remaining cloudy smoke from that person. Let the heart expand, expand, expand as you breathe in, and then as you exhale, sending out the light like a beam directly to that person, into their heart space. Lovely. Now we're going to move to somebody we find it quite challenging to be with. We all have those people in our lives. So this might be a loved one. It may be a friend that maybe you've had a disagreement with. It may be somebody you work with or an organisation that you work with. Just become aware of a person that you want to work with. And actually I find the harder the person to be with, the more transformational the practice is. So don't shy away from this. So somebody you find it really challenging to be with. And as you bring them to your mind's eye, notice any subtle changes in energy in your body. Maybe there's a tightening around the solar plexus and the heart space. Maybe there's a bit of energy rotating near the throat. Just notice it, because we can transform that energy within you at the same time. So notice this person and notice the environment that they're in. And the behaviour that you find challenging about them. I want you to see it as suffering. So an example of that would be maybe a boss who's always shouting, doesn't have a lot of patience. It must be quite difficult living like that all the time. So see the outward behaviour that is challenging as an expression of outward suffering, rather than a blame game. Because if we're triggered by that person, it's something within us. And that doesn't mean to say that that sort of behaviour is okay, because it's not. But we can view it differently, and then we're less reactive. So when you're ready, be aware of their suffering in all its forms, physical, emotional, mental. Just take your time. Be aware of what's going on in your own body chemistry, and add that to the mix that you're going to breathe in. So breathe in the suffering. Bring it into the light. And as you exhale, let it fill you and be poured outwards towards the difficult person that's challenging to be with. And just continue that process. And remember that as we work with this difficult person, notice that they too have a light at the heart space that's just as shiny as yours. However, maybe they can't connect with it because there's too much clouds of suffering and behavioural patterns around it. So, but you can recognise that in them. So just transforming that. Notice that perhaps your initial reactive, triggery energy is dissipating within your own self now, and that there's even more light that you can give out to this person. Because you're recognizing yourself in them, that we are all one, we are all connected, and it is our belief that we are separate that causes the suffering. Good. Now let's have 3 more really well focused breaths on this person. Lovely. Now we're going to release that visualization. And I want you to work with a familiar stranger now. So that this is bringing in that understanding that everybody that we see, everybody that passes us in the street is part of us through that light at the heart space. So think about a familiar stranger. So this is somebody that you would recognize, but you don't necessarily know their name. So I'm a dog walker. I know lots of people, but I don't know their names. And I always say hello. Maybe it's somebody who serves you regularly at the local shop. Maybe it's somebody who passes you in the street or sits on the same commute as you. Just notice somebody coming to mind. Be aware of them. And as you look at them, notice that there's also a light in their heart space, and they may not be connected to it because they're so driven by the senses. But notice that there is a connection that you can have with them. So recognize their suffering in all its forms, physical, emotional, mental. Notice how it shows on the body, on the earth suit. And then when you're ready, breathing in the suffering in all its forms, in a cloud of smoke towards the heart space. Sending it out. And feeling that sense of genuinely wishing them well, for them to be free from suffering. And as you do that, feel how your own heart space expands. It's so bright and shiny now. It's beyond, way beyond the physical form, filling the bioplasmic field, the energy body field all around you, all above you. Moving outwards, beyond. And then we're just going to take this part a little bit further. And I want you to imagine that you're just wandering in the street, in the shops, wherever you find yourself. And you have a smile. You can bring eye contact to everybody that you meet. And in that split second, you recognize yourself in them, that we are all part of this play on Earth. Earth is a huge school of learning for the soul. And we're all here searching. Some of us may be more aware of that search than others. And we're all equal. Be aware of that sense. And be aware of that sense of expanding that as if you can see your own light, as if you're looking down on a huge crowd and you're aware of yourself walking in the crowd with this big beacon of light, like a lighthouse. And as you expand your own light and you recognize others, all these little lights are starting to blink and shine. And this is the purpose of this practice, is recognize it in yourself first, so that we can illuminate others and raise the frequency of Earth beyond the dialogue of war and difference. Good. Now we're going to consciously bring our attention to everybody here tonight now. So if you imagine we're all in a massive circle, and that circle is around the planet. That's my dog. Sorry. She's joining in. Okay. So we're all kind of around the planet, and we've all got this huge light at the heart space. In fact, it's so bright that we can feel it pouring out through our arms to our hands. And just raise the hands slightly so the palms are facing up, and be aware of a sense of connecting to each other. Fingertips to fingertips, light to light, heart to heart. And we can feel this light really bright, it's shining outwards into the centre of this circle, which is planet Earth that we're holding, this sphere of energy. But it's also shining out behind us, so it's this huge white light now. And we're just working with each other's suffering. So let's take a deep breath in and collectively transmute the energy. As you exhale, be aware of this vast ball of infinite light expanding. Good. Now start to incorporate a sense of your neighbours. Anybody else who's in the house that's maybe not joined in with this, but they're in the house. Maybe any animals. Let them all join in. Hold them in the light. Push your awareness out beyond the neighbours into the neighbourhood. Maybe you're in a village, maybe you're in a town, maybe you're in a city. Just push your attention out, out, out until your heart space can encompass the entire globe. So we're holding the whole of humanity, planet Earth, and all the species that inhabit planet Earth. Everything that exists, vegetation, the sea, the earth, amoebas, tiny life forms, huge life forms, those with bodies, those without bodies. Hold them all. And as you breathe in, draw in the suffering, the collective suffering. And as you exhale, push out more light. So the collective suffering lies in the history that we persist in talking about. So releasing the dialogue of war, which is fear, letting it go. Breathing in the suffering of the entire planet, and breathing out light. Again, I want you to really totally focus now. We're going to do 5 breaths together of this vivid white ball of energy, transmuting everything into love, joy, and kindness. Breathing in. Nice long breath out, amplifying the energy. Good, one more breath. Total focus. Good, now let the hands fold into your own heart space now. And notice that there's so much light, it's almost like you actually can't feel your hands. And if you were to look down, you couldn't see them because it's so bright. And just be aware of that deep connection to everything that exists. It's all part of the cosmic play. So connecting to my heart space. I'm just receiving some codes for connection to self. So just breathing them in. And if they are attuned to your frequency, then they will work for you as well. Ini tisio to korbodoaha. Ishquayana orosiono to chukutukwa. Hiskrianiana no ru utukushkwa. Hebreana nushkutukoro uaraha. Ishkriana iriskriana nushkutukoro uanaha. Ebriana nasia shkutukoro. Ushkutukoro tukwa. Hebrianiana nasia. Ishkriana nushkutukuaraha. Irianasia dushkutukoro tukwa. Bring the hands into Namaste. Just acknowledging that powerful being that you are. Inhale, sweep the arms all the way up. Exhale back into the light. And Namaste.